There were countless islands in the endless ocean. There were countless islands in the endless ocean. Among these islands were many island cities of various sizes. In the eastern portion of the endless ocean, there was a small, unknown island. People were scarce here, with a population of 100,000 or so. On the mainland of the 9 states, this would amount to only a small village. At that moment, on the eastern edge of the island, an old man was wearing a long robe, sitting peacefully on the rocks fishing. He had a plaited bamboo hat on his head, under which his face was sharply angled. He had his eyes closed as if he were dozing off. "I see you've come here fishing again, old she," called another dark-skinned old man from not far off with a smile. He was getting ready to go out into the ocean to hunt monsters. There were countless sea monsters in the endless ocean, and each of them had many cultivation resources. Since these resources were extremely scarce in this island, these sea monsters were the only source of them. The old man, who was sitting there with his eyes closed, nodded slightly. He opened his eyes lazily, then smiled at the other old man and said, "You're getting ready to go out into the ocean? I can see that there are huge waves out there. There must be a big monster out there causing trouble. Why don't you stay in today?" "That's no problem. My son and my son-in-law are quite powerful cultivators. If we run into a fierce monster, that will be excellent." The old man spoke clearly and honestly. He seemed to be very proud of his children. There were several other people behind him. One of them was shirtless, and his skin was dark all over. He was very strong. The other 2 people were a couple, both of them seeming very fierce. People's appearances could change due to natural processes or due to cultivation, but they could also do because of environmental effects. "But old she, you're probably not going to catch much here. Your disciple looks a bit delicate, he probably hasn't experienced much turmoil. Why don't you let him come out into the ocean with me?" said the old man with a smile as he looked at a figure in the distance. That man was handsome, with fair skin and not even a trace of aura coming off of him. He seemed to be a scholar. No wonder the old man had said what he did. "My disciple is very lazy, so I just let him sit there," said old she with a smile. The old man nodded, then brought his son, daughter, and son-in-law into a boat and sailed out onto the sea. They waved to old she up on the rocks. When a lone boat went out into the ocean, its fate was determined by heaven. This was a popular saying on the island. As he watched the boat sail away, old she whispered, "Sometimes I envy them. They may not know the ways of heaven, but they are still able to smile at everything." The people of the island say that you never know what day you will die, so you should face every moment of your life with a smile. Behind the old man, the young disciple opened his eyes and looked out at the boat. Their environment may dictate their attitude, but it's still a kind of optimism, continued the old man. "I have a bad feeling. You two should leave." Another figure walked towards them from a mountain far away. "Brother," he said, "if you want to leave, you can." "I will stay here and accompany our master," said the young man. Old she sighed, then looked up into the distance. The sky that had once been as blue as the water was suddenly covered in dark clouds, looking very frightening. The sea was vast, endless, and capricious. It could change its face at any time. How could the people who lived on this small island understand? "If I had known that things would turn out like this, I never would have started down this path," whispered old she. He had once been a giant in the 9 states. He had mastered all heaven and earth, and his voice shouted commands that could lead to the deaths of thousands. But now, he had fallen to this level all because he had tried to get revenge on a junior. Was there anything he could say about that? Who would have thought that that junior cultivator was not just exceptionally talented, but was, in fact, the most talented of his generation? Even since he had gone to the upper worlds, he still commanded the wind and rain. In both the upper and lower worlds, there was no one like him. He vividly remembered the sacred war at the Holy Ji Palace. The youth who gave off dazzling light was still firmly imprinted in his mind. At that moment, he had realized that that man was not simply incredibly talented. And after that, his fate seemed to have been set. But he had not thought that it would happen so fast. The violent wind whipped up huge waves, and dark clouds covered the sky. The lone boat floated in the sea and was swept into the storm by a large wave. A terrible monster appeared in the storm. It appeared to be a flood dragon. It rose into the storm as it stared at the few people in the small boat. It opened its mouth as it struck out to swallow them. At that moment, a burst of incomparable majesty descended from the sky, covering the whole area. Everything seemed to freeze, and the storm slowed. The dragon looked to the shore in surprise, and a fierce sense of fear could be seen in its giant eyes. It suddenly lowered its proud head. The people in the lone boat watched this scene in surprise. They rose into the air, but it seemed that they had been slowed by something. The dragon before them and the terrible storm had been slowed as well. It seemed that the area around them had frozen. "Begone, vile beast," came a voice from the sky. In the next instant, the dreadful power dissipated, and the dragon tuned in fear and fled, diving back into the sea. A giant hand descended from the sky and pulled the lonely boat, and the people in it back to shore. When the old man and the others returned to shore, they were a bit shaken. They recovered from their shock and looked at the old man, who had been sitting there, fishing. They saw that the bamboo hat he had been wearing had blown off. He stood up straight, not seeming old in the least. There was an overpowering majesty about him. As far as the old man was concerned, he was like a god. And it was not only the old man who had changed. Even his young disciple now had an extremely sharp aura that billowed up to the clouds. Divine brilliance shone from his eyes as he looked up into the sky. The old man and the others knelt to the ground and kowtowed. They did not know what to say. Were they gods? Up in the sky, the clouds had changed color as a suffocating power descended. The old man and the others were still kneeling, but they seemed to feel something and looked up. They saw a group of figures appear like gods in the sky. The two in front were a man who looked heroic and had an incomparable aura, and a woman who, although she wore man's clothing, was still extremely beautiful. To the people from the small island, she was like a goddess. Emperor Xia's daughter was indeed like a goddess to the people of the 9 states in the lower worlds. Those who should come have finally arrived. Saint Shihua sighed in his heart. Ever since the day when the mysterious man had made his threat, he had known this day would come. But he had not expected that Futian would have already become a saint. He was a saint, a supernatural figure. How many years had he been in the upper worlds? The princess had not yet become a saint, and yet he had. "Greetings, your highness," said Saint Shihua as he looked up at Xia Qingyuan. The old man who was kneeling on the ground's heart trembled even more fiercely. Those who were like gods in their eyes still needed to greet the ones who had come. Then who on earth were these people who had come from the sky? "Saint Shihua, who ordered you to attack the palace?" said Futian as he looked down on them. Saint Shihua looked up at Futian. There was no trace of disturbance on his face. He seemed very calm. Since he had known this day would come and had worried about it for a long time, now that the day had truly come, he was unperturbed. "During the sacred war, you ordered people from the palace to destroy Shihua's sacred mountain. Did I need someone to order me to attack the palace?" answered Saint Shihua calmly. "Futian, there is also something that I would like to know. Who on earth are you?" This was a question that had puzzled him for a long time. Once, Emperor Xia had summoned all the people of the 9 states and forbade them from asking it. But now it no longer mattered. "I am Futian, the palace lord of the Holy Ji Palace in the barren state in the lands of the 9 states, under the rule of Emperor Xia's realm," said Futian clearly. Saint Shihua was stunned when he heard this. Then he smiled and did not ask again. He was Futian, the palace lord of the Holy Ji Palace in the barren state. That was enough. The enmity between them had sprung up from that. Thinking back to when Lu Zong wanted to fight with you, it seems a bit ridiculous now. First, it was Saint Ji, then Chess Saint, then finally the great Zhou sacred king. Who would have thought that you'd mature so quickly? If we had known that you'd have such success after only a few years, perhaps no one would have looked at the barren state as weak, said Saint Shihua with a smile. He spoke casually and seemed incredibly calm. Rain Saint rose into the sky, and a brilliant radiance bloomed from him. His long robe flapped in the wind as divine majesty swept out from him. Dazzling brilliance shone from his eyes. He looked at Yi Futian and said, "Since you are a saint now, I must ask you for a fight." As he said this, he stepped forward towards Yi Futian, who was in the sky. He lifted his hand and made a grabbing motion in the air. Time and space seemed to freeze, becoming solid. It was as if that area had been petrified and became incredibly dense. "Are you up to it?" Yi Futian took a step down and pointed his finger at Rain Saint. As he did so, an incredibly powerful storm of swords swept out, cutting through the air. The tip of his finger descended towards the ground, and a heaven-slaying sword descended, cutting through the power that was freezing heaven and earth. Boom! There was a loud noise as the great path solidified. Countless large stones appeared and formed a wall. They covered Yi Futian, but they were destroyed as he pointed his finger at them. Not only that, but the terrible storm of swords wrapped around Rain Saint. Divine light flowed around Yi Futian, becoming brighter and brighter. The tip of his finger kept descending towards the ground, and the heaven-slaying sword followed it. The air trembled violently as everything was destroyed, and the sword rushed towards Rain Saint. Rain Saint waved his hands, and a powerful defensive force appeared around him, seeming to freeze the air around him. A stone wall made from the divine path appeared, crossing between the heavens and the earth. Yi Futian took another step downward, and his foot pressed down upon the heavens and the earth. He continued to press down with his finger, and suddenly sword will cut through the stone wall, shattering it and piecing through it. There was a crackling sound as golden lightning cut across, and the brilliant sword will slashed into Rain Saint, piercing through his body. In the next instant, brilliant light bloomed from Rain Saint's body. He shattered into countless pieces that disappeared from the face of the earth. He had destroyed a saint with a single finger. He had destroyed a saint with a single finger. Saint Shihua watched the figure disappear in the air. His eye twitched slightly, but he was not as agitated or angered as one might imagine. He calmed down after a momentary flutter in his heart, and he looked at the magnificent figure before him. When Rain Saint had become a saint, Yi Futian was nothing more than a minor figure. He remembered those days. That was when Exihua Sacred Mountain had held the 9 States Forum. Yi Futian, who was still a noble-level cultivator, had brought the destitute people from the Holy Ji Palace in the barren state. After missing so many forums, they had finally come to participate in that one. At that time, the group of people from the barren state was tiny. As far as the people from the other holy lands were concerned, the people from the barren state were unnecessary. He still remembered that they had been seated in the last seats, and they were very unhappy about this, feeling like they had been humiliated. The people of the 9 states had just laughed and not thought it was anything serious. But later, they had taken first place in the forum and made everyone else look at them with newfound respect. But even so, the other holy lands still did not really worry about the barren state. How many years had passed since that 9 states forum? The one who was once a noble had slain Rain Saint, upon whom he had once placed such high hopes and made Saint Shihua accept his fate. If he was not experiencing it himself, he would not have believed it. The old man beside trembled with fear as he watched the scene unfolding in the sky. He and those with him were kneeling on the ground. Everything that had happened today went entirely against what they would have imagined. Before, Saint Shihua had saved them from the storm, and he had seemed like a god then. But in a flash, it seemed like this man, who they looked at as a god, would be killed. What kind of person was the brilliant, incomparable figure in the air? And that woman? Old she had even called her princess. Was this the princess of the 9th heaven? Up in the sky, Yi Futian looked down on them all. He fixed his gaze on Saint Shihua. Whoosh! Another figure rose into the sky. It was Saint Shihua's sworn brother, another saint-level cultivator of Shihua's sacred mountain. He had been a saint for a long time, but he was still stuck at the first tier of the saint plane. When they had fled from the upper worlds, they had realized that this day might come, and thus they had left a few people behind in the upper worlds. The reason he had not returned and had hidden away in the endless ocean was so that his juniors would not be dragged into all of this. Since the outcome of all this was already fixed, there was no reason to struggle. He could face it all honestly. He had understood as soon as he saw Yi Futian kill Rain Saint. Although they were on the first tier of the saint plane and had been saints for many years, there was still a gap between them that neither time nor level could fill. Some people were destined to stand out from birth. Although Yi Futian had not been a saint for very long, the combat power that he could bring forth was not something that saints from the lower worlds like them could match. After all, they had relied on outside power to become saints. But Yi Futian had been without match in the upper and lower worlds even before he had become a saint, save perhaps for Princess Xia Qingyuan. They even suspected that even Xia Qingyuan was not as good as Yi Futian. That day at the battle at the Holy Ji Palace, the divine light that he had called forth was like that of an emperor as it covered the world. Yi Futian saw his opponent shoot into the air, and a powerful airflow surrounded him. His sword whistled as it shrieked through heaven and earth. Xianyuan stepped out, and the sky trembled. He pressed his finger forward, and 10,000 sword wills pierced the sky, shattering everything in their path. Looking down in it, it looked like an endless radiance descending. And right in the middle, there was a giant, holy sword that cut through the sky towards the saint-level cultivator, who had rushed towards Yi Futian. It cut through him, killing him in mid-air. The second saint-level cultivator had fallen. And it had, once again, only taken a single attack. Of the 3 saints of Shihua's sacred mountain, Saint Shihua was the last one left. Saint Shihua was saddened by this. Once upon a time, Shihua's sacred mountain had dominated the 9 states and was even slightly stronger than the great Zhou sacred dynasty in the eastern state. But because of him, it had all been destroyed by one man. It was a tragedy. He raised his arms, and suddenly, there was an incomparably fierce airflow in the sky. A bunch of boulders was pulled out of the ground on the beach as loud booming sounds reverberated. The cliffs seemed to be uprooted, and in a flash, huge boulders were floating over a 100-mile area. The old man trembled as he knelt. His heart went numb as he watched this indescribable scene. Saint Shihua rose into the air, and the countless boulders rose with him, high up into the sky. Yi Futian and the others were still standing calmly in that infinite sky, with brilliant light shining from them. They watched this happening peacefully. Several figures stepped forward, blocking the rest of the group. Yaya's long hair flew in the wind, and countless sword wills descended from her, cutting through the boulders. A huge sword matrix was formed that gave off a frighteningly bright light. Numerous sword shadows seemed to be reflected on Saint Shihua's body. The figures behind Glass Saint and Xia Qingyuan stepped forward, indifferently watching Saint Shihua far below them. Saint Shihua was still moving forward, causing the heavens to tremble. He gave a great cry and shook his hand towards the sky. Everything seemed like it would be buried by his boulders. "Take him," ordered Xia Qingyuan coldly. As she said this, several saint-level figures acted at the same time. Saint Shihua was the last saint of Shihua's sacred mountain, so naturally, he could not be allowed to die. There was a brief but violent burst of combat in the air above the little island, which made the whole island shake. Countless people looked up and watched the short but brilliant battle. In the end, Old Shi, who had fished on the cliffs, was captured and taken away, leaving only ruins behind. The man and his family pulled themselves out of these ruins. The waves were beating against the shore, making them shiver from the cold. They looked up into the sky and saw that everyone had disappeared. They were still trembling. What had they just witnessed? This was something they would probably never forget as long as they lived. The Holy Ji Palace in the barren state could be called the most prestigious holy land of the 9 states at that time. There was none like it. The sacred war had shaken the 9 states. 10 holy lands had participated, which made it a spectacular event. Later, at the Battle of Proving Holiness, the palace had produced 5 saints, which was another spectacular event. This was in addition to Yi Futian's fame. Countless heroes from around the 9 states had rushed to the barren state, wanting to ask to cultivate at the Holy Ji Palace. Later it was rumored that Yi Futian had helped Emperor Xia achieve victory in the Battle of Empty Realm, making him a highly regarded figure. The saints of the Holy Ji Palace had brought 10 sacred methods to the lower worlds and taught them to the core disciples of the palace. Even Moon Saint of the Yu clan had sent the most talented juniors of his clan to the Holy Ji Palace. This showed how outstanding they were. Since there were too many cultivators who came seeking admittance to the palace, they had to raise the threshold for acceptance. Their disciples were getting more and more outstanding, and in these few short years, many heroes had emerged. At that moment, the palace was bustling as many of the disciples were there cultivating. In the air above the palace, a burst of divine power suddenly descended. Everyone faintly felt it and looked up into the sky. Dozhan walked out of the palace and looked up as well. He saw a brilliant light coming down, and then a group of figures descended from the sky. The 2 people at their head were heroic and magnificent. It was Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan. There were many cultivators behind them, as well as a wounded Saint Shihua. The palace lord has returned. Everyone looked up into the sky and called out greetings. Yi Futian had become the symbol of the Holy Ji Palace, the thing they set their hopes on. Welcome, Palace Lord. Everyone bowed in Yi Futian's direction, overlooking Xia Qingyuan beside him. In the past, this would have been unthinkable. Given her status, she should be the most respected person everywhere she went. But Yi Futian was unequaled within the palace. None could match his prestige, not even Princess Xia Qingyuan. He had once fought with everything he had to save the palace. He was undefeated in the sacred war and had built up the palace's current glory. Yi Futian nodded to everyone, then walked towards Dozhan, calling out, "Master." Dozhan stared at Yi Futian for a bit, then smiled and said, "You've become a saint, Palace Lord." Yi Futian nodded. Suddenly everyone in the palace was shaken. The Palace Lord had become a saint. No wonder his bearing was so magnificent. Many of his disciples had felt that something was different. The Palace Lord had finally stepped onto the divine path. And Saint Shihua, who had once launched a surprise attack on the Holy Ji Palace, had been captured. Everyone looked at the wounded, dejected figure behind Yi Futian, and their hearts were filled with many emotions. It was Saint Shihua, who had once been the lord of Shihua's sacred mountain, and before whom the Holy Ji Palace had once been insignificant and easily crushed. Now he had been captured by the Palace Lord and brought back to the palace. Such was the modern Holy Ji Palace. Who could resist them? "Keep doing what you were doing before," said Yi Futian to the people of the palace. He brought those who had come with him into a hall. Saint Zhang's figure flashed over, bringing Little Butterfly and Su Chehan with him. A bright smile appeared on Little Butterfly's face when she saw that Yi Futian had become a saint. "Elder," called Yi Futian. "Palace Lord," called Saint Zhang. "Greetings, Princess," he said to Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan nodded slightly. Beside her, Yi Futian said, "I need you to help me interrogate someone, Elder." Saint Zhang naturally knew what Yi Futian meant. He looked at Saint Shihua. "Will you really humiliate me so, Yi Futian?" asked Saint Shihua. Yi Futian ignored him, but Dozhan said coldly, "You must have forgotten what you did." "If he is not willing to talk, then make him wish he was dead," said Yi Futian coldly. "If he didn't talk, would that be enough?" "Please, Princess, grant me a boon," said Saint Shihua to Xia Qingyuan. He was Saint Shihua, how could he be humiliated like this? "I know that you have sons in the upper worlds, and I already have people watching him. I will do all I can to guarantee their safety. If someone is secretly threatening you, now they won't dare to act against them," said Xia Qingyuan. She guessed what Saint Shihua desired. Saint Shihua's face paled, and he felt powerless. He sighed and said, "Princess, if I tell you all that I know, it will still be meaningless." He did not know the identity of the man they sought. He could only be sure that none of this was a coincidence. It had all been deliberately planned. Saint Shihua finally talked. He had no other choice. Saint Shihua finally talked. He had no other choice. Right now, it was not just Yi Futian who wanted to get payback on him. Princess Xia Qingyuan had brought others with her. There was no escape. There was an area in the Holy Ji Palace where there were usually very few people. The area was filled with tombstones, and names were carved onto each one. These were the names of cultivators of the Holy Ji Palace who had died in battle. Saint Shihua was escorted there and was placed on a punishment platform in the middle of all the tombstones. He knew what was about to happen. His face grew extremely pale. Many people from the Holy Ji Palace gathered there, standing behind Yi Futian. They all looked very solemn. As Saint Shihua was escorted to the platform, chains appeared out of thin air. They were locked onto his body, and even directly penetrated his bones, making him unable to stand up firmly. "Kneel," said Yi Futian coldly. "Yi Futian, no matter what I've done, I was still once the lord of Shihua's sacred mountain, one of the titans of the 9 states. You've captured me now, so if you want to kill me, go ahead. Why must you humiliate me like this?" Saint Shihua snarled. Would he kneel to be punished and then killed? No, he was Saint Shihua, the hegemon of the eastern state. You instigated the alliance between the great Zhou sacred king and Saint Ji, which caused the sacred war of all the holy lands of the 9 states. Many people died because of this. Even 1,000 deaths would not be punishment enough for this. What does who you are and your status have to do with anything? Said Yi Futian calmly and coldly. Kneel and confess. As he said this, a terrifying sword shrieked past, cutting into Saint Shihua's legs at the knees. His bones snapped as he knelt to the ground. His face twisted as he looked at Yi Futian in fury. "Princess, I once held Shihua's sacred mountain in the eastern state in His Majesty's name. How can you let this happen?" he roared. "You were defeated and fled Shihua's sacred mountain without any regard to your honor. What right do you have to call yourself Saint Shihua?" said Xia Qingyuan indifferently. A group of figures appeared above Saint Shihua. They were Dozhan, Su Shang, Zhuge Qingfeng, and the other saints of the barren state. The divine power within them spread out, and a terrible destructive power descended upon Saint Shihua's body. Today, Saint Shihua's blood would be sacrificed to those who had died at the Holy Ji Palace. All the disciples of the Holy Ji Palace gathered together, staring at the scene before them. All of them appeared extremely solemn. Those among them who had experienced several sacred wars all had red eyes. There were many tears, especially from the older people whose feelings ran deeper. Those great wars had been so tragic. The first time, the great Zhou sacred king had led a great army to attack the palace, threatening to destroy it. At that time, Dozhan had faced the divine catastrophe, not fearing for his own life, to win the battle and ensure the safety of the palace and giving them a chance to recover. This had lasted until the outbreak of the most tragic of all the sacred wars, in which the palace lord's wife, Hua Jieyu, had died. Even though it had been many years since, when they thought back to it, it was like it was happening right before their eyes. They would never forget. Those who had entered the palace later knew of this too. Although the palace was now in its golden era, these events had all become legendary, and every person newly admitted to the palace memorized this piece of history. Now, as they gathered in the cemetery, they were struck by emotion, and all looked very solemn. Terrifying divine light fell upon Saint Shihua's body, just like the light of the divine catastrophe. Shihua looked up at everyone angrily. His eyes were bloodshot. Were they really going to let him die in such a humiliating way? He had waited for this to happen peacefully. He had prepared himself for death. But Yi Futian would not let him die peacefully. He would first carve Saint Shihua's name onto the barren state's pillar of shame. "Kill him," spat Yi Futian. Suddenly, the 5 palace lords of the barren state launched devastating attacks at the same time. The sky looked like the end of days was coming as terrible power shot down, piercing right through Saint Shihua's head. Saint Shihua's body trembled violently. His eyes were open wide, still showing his humiliation and unwillingness to die like this. He roared as blood poured from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. But the destructive attacks continued to fall on him. This was his punishment. In this way, the life of Saint Shihua, who had once dominated the eastern state, was brought to an end. The life force of a saint-level cultivator was powerful, and so Saint Shihua struggled for a long time. But his life force was eventually completely exhausted. His body fell to the ground slowly and became a corpse. A hegemonic figure had died in the cemetery of the Holy Ji Palace. He was still kneeling there as he died, his head bowed in confession, and his body chained to the tombstone. It was an extremely miserable way to go. Yi Futian watched this all happen calmly. He had no sympathy, no pity. This was the punishment that Saint Shihua deserved for all he had done. Someone behind Yi Futian handed him a glass filled with wine. He dropped the wine glass in front of the cemetery and then bowed to all the tombs. The barren state was not like it had been before, and the Holy Ji Palace even less so. The Holy Ji Palace would one day become the greatest power in the 9 states, an unmatched holy land for cultivation. Its disciples would cover the earth. The cultivators of the palace, particularly those who had fought in the sacred war, would receive their own cultivation resources and would have a bright future. But the dead were dead. As far as he knew, they would never see the Holy Ji Palace's current glory, nor would they ever have a way to experience what that glory would bring. Even saying that they had died contently was nothing more than self-consolation. Death was death. There was only one life. As if affected by this emotional atmosphere, all the disciples of the palace bowed along with Yi Futian. All were serious and solemn. If the families of those who died in battle are still here, give them the best cultivation resources. And have them be trained by elders and treated with special favor, said Yi Futian. Don't worry, Palace Lord, we have already done so, Sword Demon said as he and a few others came up to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded. This would let him rest a little easier. Now, all that is left is Saint Ji and the others from the Hall of Holy Light, whispered Yi Futian. He wanted to see how long Saint Ji could hide for. Waiting for death must not be a comfortable thing to do. Let's go. Yi Futian turned to leave, and the people of the palace made a path for him. At that moment, Yi Futian had a thought. He should pass on the title of Palace Lord. The palace's position in the 9 states was as unshakable as a mountain, no one would be able to threaten them again. Everything was on the right track, and now that he was a saint, it was even more so. The other holy lands would know about what had happened in the upper worlds. And now that Saint Shihua was dead, once he had destroyed the Hall of Holy Light, he would no longer need to be in charge of the Holy Ji Palace. After all, he seldom came back to the lower worlds. The reason he had not abdicated his position was that the palace still needed him. He was a symbol, the symbol of the palace. Yi Futian looked at Dozhan beside him. Other than here, 5 other palaces had been established by the Holy Ji Palace. Master Dozhan commanded the Central Palace, and he had once been the Master of Battle Sage Palace, which was second only to Holy Sage Pavilion. If he were to step down, his master would be the most natural choice to succeed him. He had always believed in the Holy Ji Palace. As for what went on in the upper worlds, although Saint Shihua had come clean, he was farther from the end of this matter than he had thought. Saint Shihua had known too little. He only knew that a mysterious person had sought him out and made him get involved. But he did not know who this person was. Moreover, they were good at hiding and being unpredictable. They had arranged everything seamlessly. All that they were sure about now was that someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. They had already known this, so it was not too important. They still had not found any key evidence. It could be said that there were no flaws to be found in their opponent's plan. When Saint Shihua was hiding in the upper worlds, I had people watching him, but he was in contact with too many people. After so long, it would be impossible to have all of them watched. Our opponent is skilled at hiding his identity, and can even conceal his saint-level aura. It may be impossible to find him now, said Xia Qingyuan. Yi Futian nodded slightly. Now, we can only rely on conjecture and the process of elimination. Think, Princess, how many people in the upper worlds of Emperor Xia's realm could play this sort of game? Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian. She naturally knew what he meant. Who could arrange everything so secretly, not leaving any holes, and make an alliance with Shao Sheng that he did not dare to divulge? There were not many in Emperor Xia's realm who could do this. Only those at the very top could have such power and skill. When we return, I will investigate this in detail, said Xia Qingyuan. Thank you, Princess, said Yi Futian. These days, Xia Qingyuan was indeed doing a lot for him. News of Saint Shihua's death spread quickly throughout the 9 states. Everywhere, people experienced mixed emotions. Saint Shihua was a hegemon whose fame had once shaken the earth. He had called the great Zhou sacred king to attack the Holy Ji Palace in a sacred war. No one could have imagined that, in the end, he would be humiliated and killed like that. Nowadays, the Holy Ji Palace made everyone respect it. It was said that Yi Futian had become a saint. On that day, a powerful aura descended upon the Holy Ji Palace in the barren state. Many figures walked out of the palace and heard voices. The Ocean Palace in the Endless Ocean has come to greet Lord Yi. The North Deep in the Endless Ocean has come to greet Lord Yi. The Celestial Cliffs in the Endless Ocean has come to greet Lord Yi. The voices rang out, sounding very humble. Not only had 3 great holy lands come, but their lords had come as well. Their attitude was very respectful, and they trembled with fear. They had finally caved in. They had heard the news that Saint Shihua had been found by Yi Futian on a small island in the Endless Ocean. The people of the island said that Yi Futian had killed a saint with 1 finger. The Yi Futian of today was not like the Yi Futian of the past. They had once submitted to the Holy Ji Palace, but they did this without any sincerity. After all, the enmity left over from the sacred war was still there. Now, when they saw how strong Yi Futian was, how could they not feel afraid? They feared that Yi Futian would come to them to settle old scores, and they would come to the same end as Saint Shihua. At the Holy Ji Palace, many cultivators looked up into the void. At the Holy Ji Palace, many cultivators looked up into the void. They knew that this was because the lords of the 3 holy lands of the Endless Ocean got scared and came to visit preemptively. The deaths of the 3 great saints of Shihua's sacred mountain, especially the death of Saint Shihua, seemed to have had a huge impact on the 9 states, and with great rippling effects. Go to the palace cemetery and repent for 3 days, Yi Futian said. When the lords of the 3 holy lands of the Endless Ocean heard this, they were stunned. There was no preaching, just the 1 sentence. Let them repent by themselves. This kind of directness was difficult for them to get used to. But soon, they took a deep breath of relief. Still, their hearts were conflicted. Yi Futian did not see them, and it seemed to be a gesture of slight disrespect, but they had vowed to submit to the Holy Ji Palace and swore loyalty to Yi Futian. Moreover, it was unrealistic to say that Yi Futian did not hold any resentment against them. In doing so, Yi Futian probably wanted to put an end to the matter. Henceforth, the storm of the sacred war was now ended with no further repercussions. If so, repenting for 3 days, though somewhat humiliating, was not a big deal. After all, given Yi Futian's position today in the 9 states, traveling to the lower worlds with the Princess Xia Qingyuan personally accompanying him, this was not usual treatment for someone from the 9 states. Even the highly respected Saint Xia had to pay respect to the little princess when he saw her. In the land of the 9 states, who could walk shoulder to shoulder with the little princess? Only Yi Futian of the barren state. What was the status of Yi Futian in the past, and what was the status of Yi Futian today, and what would be the status of Yi Futian in the future? Once the 3 thought about that, they looked at each other and replied, yes. After that, they stepped out and headed toward the cemetery, prepared to repent. At this time, from a palace, Yi Futian stepped out. Here, Dozhan, Yuqi, Zhuge Qingfeng, and the others were all here. Yi Futian walked to the front of the staircase and looked down at the vast land of the palace beneath. Lifting his head, Yi Futian looked up at the sky, where a battle of destruction took place once. Many cultivators of the Holy Ji Palace had perished, which also ruined the Holy Ji Palace. Now that great Zhou's sacred king had died, and Saint Shihua, the culprit, had received his just punishment, should all this be over? After a long period of silence, Yi Futian said, all these years, the 9 states was in chaos. I put an end to the 3 great holy lands. Although the Holy Ji Palace has now risen, the land of 9 states has suffered a setback, especially the eastern state. Dozhan and the others listened quietly without saying anything. Of all 3 holy lands of eastern state, the glass saint was now with Yi Futian, Shihua's sacred mountain and the great Zhou sacred dynasty had both been destroyed. Sky Saint came and went as he pleased, without belonging to any place. It had indeed fared the worst. The old palace lord hopes that the Holy Ji Palace will be strong and become a holy land to pass on our crafts in the barren state. Now that the first step has been completed, Master and all you elders will complete the rest, Yi Futian said. Futian. Of course, Dozhan and the others understood the meaning behind Yi Futian's words. It seemed that he had an intention to resign. Futian, you have to know that whether you are at the Holy Ji Palace or not, even if you are cultivating outside, you carry the belief of the palace, as long as you keep the title of the palace lord, Dozhan said. Dozhan is right, as for the day-to-day stuff, you can leave them to your master, Yuqi added. In the past few years, although I bear the title of the palace lord, it was the master and the elders who took care of the palace. There would be no Holy Ji Palace if it were not for all of you. Strictly speaking, it is not I who made the Holy Ji Palace, but it was the palace that achieved my reputation. Yi Futian shook his head. Now, everything should return to their rightful place. I am an incompetent palace lord, but I will do the last bit of things I can for the 9 states, for the palace. Dozhan and everyone looked at Yi Futian. It seemed that Yi Futian had already made up his mind. At this moment, Yi Futian looked into the distance and said softly, Master, I'm troubling you to go to all the holy lands in the 9 states and invite them to come to the Holy Ji Palace in Barren State. The Holy Ji Palace will host a feast to discuss the planning of the grandest martial arts event in the land of 9 states that will surpass the 9-state forum. This competition belongs to the cultivators of the Sage Plain. At that time, I will invite the princess to participate in the discussion, and I hope that this competition will open up the communication between the upper and the lower worlds. Dozhan and the others trembled inside, all of them were shocked. They vaguely understood what Yi Futian wanted to do. Today, perhaps in all of 9 states, only Yi Futian could have done it. Even Saint Xia couldn't do it. In this land of 9 states, only he could really influence the princess. Very well. Dozhan took a deep breath and then nodded in earnest. If this could happen, it would indeed be a great contribution to the land of 9 states, and it would make the spirit of martial arts in the 9 states that much stronger. Others also nodded earnestly. If Yi Futian could have this ambition, they were naturally willing to work together for this. This event must be widely spread and have participants from all over, and all of the 9 states will need to be informed. Yi Futian continued, in addition, pass my order on to the Hall of Holy Light of Qi State and tell them I also invited the Hall of Holy Light to join us in this event. The Hall of Holy Light is also a part of the 9 states as long as those who participated in the war are willing to come to apologize and repent for their past wrongdoings. Yi Futian will no longer look to the past, and the Hall of Holy Light is still one of the holy lands in the 9 states. There is only one person I will not forgive, Saint Ji, Lord of the Hall of Holy Light. Saint Ji was one of the culprits of the sacred war. All the others could be forgiven and their pasts forgotten, except for Saint Ji, who initiated the sacred war. He would never be forgiven. Of course, the premise was that those who participated in the war must come to apologize and plead guilty and repent in the cemetery. Dozhan and the others, as they looked at Yi Futian, who stood there alone with his back facing them. After the initial shock, a smile appeared in their eyes. Yi Futian today was a saint. Yes, Palace Lord. Everyone took their orders then retreated. Soon, they all stepped into the void, heading out for all the places within the 9 states. Soon, the news spread throughout the 9 states. Yi Futian had summoned all the holy lands in the 9 states. The Holy Ji Palace of Barren State would hold an unprecedented grand event. In a short time, the 9 states responded, and all the major holy lands had responded, saying that they would go to the Barren State to participate in this grand event. The Barren State, once again, attracted worldwide attention and became the focal point of 9 states. Within the 9 states, countless people set off to the Barren State, wanting to witness this great spectacle. Many people had said that this event would be the most spectacular event of the 9 states in decades. As the appointed day approached, in the land of the Summer State, Saint Xia had set off, and Saint Li of the 9 State College had also departed. Of course, there was also Moon Saint. Holy lands, such as War State, Vajra region, Holy Temple of 10 Corners, began to set off one after another. In Qi State, the Lord of the Qi clan personally led his group there, and the same with Jixia Holy Palace and Yu House. Only the atmosphere of the Hall of Holy Light seemed a little peculiar. In the past few years, the development of the Hall of Holy Light had been rather fast, and it had become one of the top 5 holy lands in the 9 states. Saint Ji, the Lord of the Hall of Holy Light, ranked 5th on the saint ranking. For a time, he was at the top of the world, dominant and sharp, his force about to surpass that of the Qi clan, the long-time top holy land in Qi State and Jixia Holy Palace. However, after the Sacred War, Saint Ji was put under house arrest, and the Hall of Holy Light was continuously guarded by the Holy Light. He dared not relax for one moment. The grand matrix of Holy Light protection of the Hall of Holy Light was finally opened. The cultivators of the Hall of Holy Light successively walked down and left, actually going toward the direction of the Holy Ji Palace in Barren State. This was a situation that no one could have foreseen. In the Hall of Holy Light, there was a main hall, high above the sky. Standing at its edge, one could overlook the entire vastness of the Hall of Holy Light. At this moment, Saint Ji stood there, watching the flow of the crowd below, that cultivators of the hall, stepped out and left, one after the other. There were fewer and fewer people, and he stood there, watching. As the people at the Hall of Holy Light decreased day by day, watching, many bowed to him and paid their respect before leaving. Until there was no one else left, the once glorious Hall of Holy Light now seemed extremely quiet. At a glance, there was hardly anyone in sight. The main hall that disappeared into the clouds seemed particularly lonesome, and his figure seemed even more desolate. Today must be the day that Yi Futian is holding the feast. Saint Ji looked into the distance and murmured, "Yes, Lord." Behind Saint Ji, an old manservant stood there quietly. It was an old man who had watched Saint Ji grow up many years ago. His hair was completely white. "Uncle Han, was I wrong?" Saint Ji asked. "My lord, in this world, there is no absolute right or wrong," the old man whispered softly. "Why did the people of the Hall of Holy Light all choose to leave?" Saint Ji asked again. "This is human nature. Not to mention, the Lord of the Holy Ji Palace, Yi Futian, was able to let go of the grievances of the Sacred War. He is a man of stature. It is not surprising that the people of the hall would go down to join him." "My lord should not blame them," said the old man. "Yes," Saint Ji nodded, "I thought I would wait for his revenge, but I didn't expect him to let it all go instead. And now that he is holding the event of a lifetime in the 9 states, not only trying to promote the Holy Ji Palace of Barren State but also to promote the 9 states, I am a far lesser man than him in terms of spirit and aspiration." The old man stood quietly and said nothing. Saint Ji smiled and said, "It's been quite a few years, and it's time for me to get out and take a walk." "Lord." The old man looked up at Saint Ji. Emperor Xia was the one who personally issued the house arrest on Saint Ji. Whoever dared to disobey the order of Emperor Xia was unlikely to live. Since he could have such generosity in his heart, I hope not to hinder the Hall of Holy Light from now on. As Saint Ji's words fell, a boundless radiance darted into the sky from his body, and then his body turned into light and rushed into the sky above. An era has ended. Saint Ji's voice spread through the hall of holy light. He disappeared after he rushed out of the hall. Since then, no one in the 9 states had seen Saint Ji. Some people claimed that he had died, executed by Emperor Xia. Some claimed that he was taken by the people of Emperor Xia. This became a mystery in the 9 states. Contrary to the bleakness of the Hall of Holy Light, this day at the Holy Ji Palace of Barren State, there was an unparalleled feast that would affect the future of the 9 states. At this feast, Yi Futian announced that in the future land of the 9 states, the 9-state forum, that was to be held once every 3 years, would not only be open to those below the sage plane but that sages could also participate. Moreover, the principalities of the upper world would come down to the lower world and chose the best of them to be brought to the upper world to cultivate. Princess Xia Qingyuan had promised. All of the 9 states were shocked. Of course, there was something else that was even more shocking. Yi Futian announced that he would step down as the lord of the Holy Ji Palace of the Barren State and that the new palace lord was to be Saint Dozhan. This turbulent era had finally come to an end. Cottage Villa, in the upper world of Emperor Xia's realm, had made many new acquisitions. Cottage Villa, in the upper world of Emperor Xia's realm, had made many new acquisitions. Yi Futian had already become a saint and gained a firm foothold in Emperor Xia's realm. He deduced that the last assassination attempt had been meant to get rid of him in the name of Emperor Li's realm, but now that he had returned, the others would not be bold enough to try it again. Without Xiao Sheng as a sacrificial lamb, it would be easier for their scheme to be exposed. Therefore, they had brought some more people from the lower world to the palace. They'd brought with them the 4 senior brothers, Shuiyi, the entire family of Yu Shi, Qingxian, Lu Qinyu, and Goddess Wangyue. Now that the big senior brother was a saint, Goddess Wangyue would naturally follow him and they would cultivate together. The cottage villa was quite lively. On a green pasture, Yi Futian sat quietly. In the distance, an elf-like girl ran through the pasture toward him, shouting, "Uncle Yi." Yi Futian opened his arms, and the girl rushed into them. Yi Futian said with a smile, "Little grass, what are you doing here?" "My dad is forcing me to read again, but I have read a lot already, so I need to take a breather," the little girl said seriously and quite precociously. Yi Futian squeezed her cheeks and said, "It's for your own good that your dad asked you to read. It will make it easier for you to cultivate in the future." "What do I need to have such great cultivation for?" Little Grass asked. "To protect yourself," Yi Futian replied. "Aren't you here to protect me?" Little Grass looked at Yi Futian with her big eyes. Yi Futian looked at the girl's innocent eyes, smiled, and nodded. "You're right. So I don't need to cultivate so hard in the future, right?" Little Grass continued with her line of reasoning. Yi Futian had no words to refute her. Children nowadays were a lot sharper than he had been at that age. "Uncle Yi, when will Auntie Jiayu come back?" Little Grass asked. Yi Futian was stunned for a moment, speechless and without a response. Then he squeezed out a smile and said, "Soon. But my mom said that Auntie Jiayu is now an angel and that she has gone back to heaven." Little Grass asked with some bewilderment, "But isn't this heaven?" Yi Futian looked at Little Grass and was speechless again for a moment. "Uncle Yi, I kinda miss Auntie Jiayu." Little Grass's eyes were slightly reddened. When she was little, Yi Futian and Hua Jiayu had been extremely good to her. Now she was almost grown, but she had never seen Auntie Jiayu again. Was heaven a destination that she would never return from? "Little Grass," a voice called out. Yushi was coming toward them. He looked at Little Grass and said, "You are bothering your Uncle Yi again." "It's okay, I was a little bored anyway." Yi Futian smiled and hugged the little girl who was leaning on him and said softly, "Me too, I miss Auntie Jiayu too. One day we will go and find her together." "Really?" Little Grass looked up at Yi Futian. "Sure, when have I ever lied to you?" Yi Futian asked. Okay then. Little Grass nodded seriously. Yushi watched Yi Futian and felt some sadness. It had been some years now, but Hua Jieyu was still a source of pain in their hearts. For Yi Futian, it must be even worse. Even though he was smiling at the moment, there was no mistaking the faint sadness on his face. Even though he was now a saint, there were still some things and some people that could not be let go of easily. Yushi looked at Little Grass again. The girl was a teenager now, but her mind was extraordinarily innocent. She understood that this was because of the environment where she had grown up. Although Little Grass had experienced a period of turmoil at the palace, because of her age, she had always been protected. Coupled with the fact that she had never gone outside by herself, she lacked practical worldly experience. She had rarely even gone outside of Alchemy City or the Holy Ji Palace. Yi Futian and the other disciples of the cottage were extremely indulgent and fond of her, so it was difficult for her to grow up. Is there still no news? Yushi asked softly. Yi Futian nodded slightly. Saint Shihua had not provided much valuable information at all. The only person who might have known the truth, Xiao Sheng, was now dead. Along with him, all the clues regarding the matter had been lost. Not even Xia Qingyuan could obtain too many valuable leads in her investigation. These days, Yi Futian had a better understanding of the many top principalities in Emperor Xia's realm. Although he did not know the truth, he had some hypotheses of his own. However, these hypotheses were unlikely to be confirmed soon. In the past, he'd dared to go to the Xiao clan to confront Xiao Sheng because he was convinced that Xiao Sheng had participated. Although there was no hard evidence, he was still determined to interrogate him. However, this would be more difficult than it had been before. It would probably be impossible to act like that again. Of course, he would not stop forever. But even if he was unwilling, he would probably need to let it go for the time being. Now, many people at the villa had reached the bottleneck of cultivation just below the Saint Plain, especially the third senior brother, Yu Sheng, and Wu Chen. They were already at the peak of the sages, within reach of the Saint Plain. The most important thing right now was his hope that everyone would successively enter the Saint Plain. However, sanctification required the right state of mind and opportunity. There was a figure coming out from the sky with a sword. Yi Futian turned his head and saw Qin Zhuang, clad in black, standing in front of him. He said, Yaotai Divine Palace has prepared the Yaotai Divine Feast and sends their invitation. Yaotai Divine Feast, Yi Futian murmured to himself. The Yaotai Divine Feast was the grandest banquet held in the Yaotai Divine Palace. The banquet was always held with great fanfare, as everyone who was anyone in Emperor Xia's realm was invited. However, Yi Futian was not very interested in this, so he said, decline on my behalf. Just say that I am busy with cultivation and have no time to attend. People at Yaotai Divine Palace mentioned that Goddess Yao Shi told them specifically that Master Yi should attend, Qin Zhuang insisted. When Yi Futian heard what Qin Zhuang said, he remembered that the woman with stunning beauty, and hesitated for a second. He gave it some thought and nodded, saying, very well. Strictly speaking, Yao Shi was a friend. Since she had already told him to attend, he would oblige. He would think of it as taking a short break for some relaxation. Qin Zhuang said nothing more and turned to leave. In Emperor Xia's realm, the news of the Yaotai Divine Feast had caused quite a stir. Yaotai Divine Palace was the highest power in Emperor Xia's realm. The enchanted island of the west in Emperor Xia's realm was known for its beautiful women and dozens of goddesses. It also gave rise to the top force composed entirely of women. The Lord of Yaotai Divine Palace was known as the Holy Mother of the West and was also the head of all the saints of the enchanted island of the west in Emperor Xia's realm. She was the most distinguished character in the entire realm. The reputation of her beauty had spread throughout the world when she was young. She was an unusual woman who was able to compete with Queen Xiao for the title of the first beauty in Emperor Xia's realm. The Yaotai Divine Feast was not held every year, only once in a blue moon. However, every time the Yaotai Divine Feast was held, it signified a major event happening at Yaotai Divine Palace. Many in Emperor Xia's realm speculated that this year's Yaotai Divine Feast was being held by Yaotai Divine Palace as an occasion to select a path companion for the current Virgin of Yaotai, Ao Shi. Although Yaotai Divine Palace was a principality of female cultivation, it did not reject the idea of path companions. On the contrary, many of the goddesses in Yaotai Divine Palace had path companions and cultivated outside. Even more so, their standard was extremely harsh, and their selected companions were only people of renown. It was said that at Yaotai Divine Palace, there were methods that were suitable for couples to cultivate together. For those who cultivated in Emperor Xia's realm, many had fantasies about the goddesses of Yaotai Divine Palace. Therefore, those who could succeed were rarer still. This time around, people in Emperor Xia's realm speculated that it was Yao Shi who wanted to choose a significant other. As the reigning virgin, Yao Shi's beauty was peerless, and many even claimed that she was qualified to compete for the title of the first beauty in Emperor Xia's realm. Some had even compared her with Princess Xia Qingyuan, so one could only imagine the outstanding beauty she possessed. For this reason, how could the announcement of Yaotai Divine Feast not create a sensation all on its own? Those who received the invitations were the most powerful figures in Emperor Xia's realm. Ordinary people did not qualify. People from all corners of Emperor Xia's realm set off for the enchanted island of the west to the Yaotai Divine Palace. Futian was prepared to depart and see for himself. However, before Futian was able to leave, someone came to the cottage villa and appeared in front of him. The man who appeared was the guard of Emperor Xia's palace. He'd come carrying orders. Saint Yi, the guard greeted Futian with a bow. Now that Futian was sanctified, Yi being his surname, he could be called Saint Yi, if there was no other specific title. Futian nodded and asked, "What message do you bring?" The princess would like to remind Saint Yi that although Saint Yi has already entered the divine path, the road of cultivation will only be more difficult in the future, and cautioned against complacency. There are many methods for cultivation in the Golden Hall of the Lotus that could aid in comprehension and further cultivation, and there are now divine methods of cultivation that Saint Yi might want to visit for further enlightenment. "Do not forget and neglect your cultivation," said the messenger. Futian nodded and replied, "Many thanks to the princess." The messenger nodded but made no motion to leave. Futian looked at him, the messenger looked back at Futian. The atmosphere was slightly ominous. "Is there anything else?" Futian couldn't help but ask when he saw the messenger making no move to leave. "No." The messenger shook his head. Then Futian saw that the guard looked strange. The guard asked, "So, Saint Yi is not going to the Golden Hall of the Lotus to cultivate?" Futian understands the message of the princess and will go to visit and cultivate at another time, Futian replied. "Oh." The guard nodded, still showing no intention of leaving. "Then, you may return with my reply," Futian said. "Yes." The messenger nodded, looked deeply at Futian. He finally turned to leave. Futian saw the messenger departing and said to those around him, "We should go now." "Let's go," the black-winged condor muttered excitedly. The master was always so authoritative. Better yet, this time, they would go and collect the Virgin of Yaotai. This thought made the black-winged condor even more excited. The experience of the past was memorable and, to the black-winged condor, downright unforgettable. He had also seen Yao Shi before. Compared to that she-devil in Emperor Xia's palace, Yao Shi was much gentler. If only Xia Qingyuan knew what the black-winged condor secretly thought of her, what would she do with him? She-devil? The territory of the western region of Emperor Xia's realm was vast, populated with many enchanted islands and temples of cultivation for saints. The territory of the western region of Emperor Xia's realm was vast, populated with many enchanted islands and temples of cultivation for saints. The Holy Mother of the West, who was respectfully referred to as the Holy Mother, indicated the prowess of her cultivation. She ranked first among all the saints in the western region with no one close behind. Whether it was cultivation or appearance, she reigned over all of the outstanding figures in the western region. Yao Tai Enchanted Island was the temple of cultivation for the Holy Mother of the West. This enchanted island was surrounded by numerous other enchanted islands. There were countless goddesses and beauties who all regarded Yao Tai Enchanted Island as a holy land. Anyone who possessed outstanding talent would come to Yao Tai Enchanted Island, hoping that they would one day become a member of Yao Tai Enchanted Island. But the selection of disciples at Yao Tai Enchanted Island was extremely stringent. Most people were destined to hope in vain. Naturally, the Yao Tai Divine Palace was not the only principality of Yao Tai Enchanted Island. There were countless cultivators on the island. It was one of the most prosperous areas in the western region. On Yao Tai Enchanted Island, countless people were discussing the same thing, the Yao Tai Divine Feast. The last time the Yao Tai Divine Feast had been held by Yao Tai Divine Palace, it was when the Holy Mother of the West had formally taken over the position of Palace Lord of Yao Tai Divine Palace, and it had been decades since then. From this, one could assume that the Yao Tai Divine Feast always coincided with the occurrence of major events. But this time, people on Yao Tai Enchanted Island thought that the most likely reason for the feast was that Yao Shi wanted to choose a path companion. Therefore, all the renowned figures from all walks of life had arrived, even those who did not receive an invitation were in attendance at Yao Tai Enchanted Island. If Goddess Yao Shi wants to choose a companion, who is the most likely candidate? People were talking about it all over the island. Who knows? There are so many impressive figures in Emperor Xia's realm, but Yao Tai Enchanted Island is located in the western region. It is some distance away from the center of Emperor Xia's realm. It is said that those who are the closest have the best chance. The young master of Shura Palace seemed to have been pursuing Goddess Yao Shi, whether it was talent or family name. He is outstanding, so his odds are good. Many people nodded in agreement. Shura Palace was a powerful demonic clan of the western region, and its strength was truly impressive. Furthermore, Shura Palace also had people at Emperor Xia's. Among the 8 sacred generals, Sacred General Shura, who was the most skilled at offense, was from Shura Palace and enjoyed a great reputation. The reigning Palace Lord of Shura Palace and Sacred General Shura were brothers, he the elder brother. However, it was believed that it was Sacred General Shura whose cultivation was a level higher. The young master of Shura Palace was the son of the Palace Lord of Shura Palace, and he had a close relationship with Sacred General Shura, so his status was considered very prominent. Although the young master of Shura Palace has excellent talents and comes from an impressive family, ultimately, he cultivates in the way of demonic method, and his temperament is cold and cruel. Goddess Yao Shi is as gentle as the water, so she does not necessarily like that kind of man. Someone else added, I am in favor of the romantic man from Hundred Flowers Valley. He is considered to be the most legendary person in the western region in recent years. Many people remembered this person when they heard this. Hundred Flowers Valley was a force composed of goddesses, but a few decades ago, the Palace Lord of Hundred Flowers Valley had found an orphan and raised him in Hundred Flowers Valley. As a result, he became the only man among the many hundreds of female cultivators there. He was handsome beyond words, his looks even hinting of feminine beauty. His talents were excellent and he was said to have the most perfect character. It was said that he had already arrived at Yao Tai Enchanted Island, and would be attending the Yao Tai Divine Feast. Don't just focus on the cultivators from the Western Region Temple. In the central area of Emperor Xia's realm, there are many noteworthy characters. In the Jiutian Temple alone, there are countless proud talents, not to mention the many descendants of Master of Jiutian Temple. Any one of them would be extraordinary. There is also the Xianyuan clan, the descendants of Ren Huang, and the swordsmen of Lihan Heaven, and Wang Chuan, whose presence is yet to be determined. What's more, don't forget about the most prestigious person in this generation, a cultivator who could slay the saints as a sage. It was rumored that Goddess Yao Shi knew him and that their relationship was not insubstantial. He was also invited this time. If he comes, I am afraid that those many excellent figures in the western region will be overshadowed. Don't just build up other people. Is this Yi Futian really that powerful? Someone asked curiously. After all, they had only heard of him and not seen him with their own eyes. This new rising star, since the battle with the Shao clan, was well known in Emperor Xia's realm. Many others had learned of his name. He was able to defeat Shao Sheng while in Sage Plain and force his death. How can that be false? Someone asked. You know, Shao Sheng was not a frivolous character either. Before he became a saint, he was one of the few people in Emperor Xia's realm below the Saint Plain who enjoyed great reputation and recognition as Queen Zhao's nephew. Even so, he was crushed by Yi Futian and was forced to die by his hand. You can imagine what kind of person Yi Futian is. However, many people thought that Yi Futian's endgame would be the little princess. The upper world was vast and endless, but as long as Emperor Xia's palace was involved, it would be a major event. The little princess Xia Qingyuan was an unusual character. Unless they were truly peerless, people rarely struck her fancy. But as her relationship with Yi Futian was a close one, and because Yi Futian had been the only person who could walk shoulder to shoulder with the little princess in all these years, it had caused many to speculate. His Royal Highness, the fifth prince, has arrived. At that moment, a voice was heard in the distance. Many people were stunned. Someone asked, "What was that you said?" From the imperial palace, the fifth prince has come down to Yaotai Enchanted Island, the man said, looking at the space below. Many people trembled in their hearts. Within moments, the news caused great waves of excitement. Had the prince come in person from Emperor Xia's palace? Emperor Xia had 6 children, and the little princess was his youngest child and only daughter. The other 5 were all a lot older than the little princess. The 5 princes were all in the Saint Plain. Now the prince had arrived in person to attend the Yaotai Divine Feast. What would happen? If His Royal Highness the fifth prince had an idea, and if Yaotai Divine Palace wanted to choose a path companion for Yao Shi, then the prince would undoubtedly be the most promising choice. If she married a prince, she could enter the palace and get to the heart of Emperor Xia's realm. However, some others also thought that Yao Shi, as the reigning virgin, would be the future heiress of Yaotai Divine Palace. If she married a prince, she would have to enter the palace and Yaotai Divine Palace would lose Yao Shi. The Yaotai Divine Feast seemed to be getting more interesting by the second. Every prominent figure from all corners of Emperor Xia's realm arrived at Yaotai Divine Palace. The Divine Palace was divided into enchanted islands which were interconnected into a whole. Looking down from the void, they were extremely beautiful. Visitors from many places were put on different enchanted islands. A mighty procession descended. The head of the group was extremely distinguished, clad in a brilliant robe. From Yaotai Enchanted Island, figures flashed and many goddesses personally came to greet the newcomers. All bowed and said, "Greetings to your Royal Highness." No need for formalities, goddesses. I came at my father, the Emperor's, behest to attend the Yaotai Divine Feast, and am just one of many guests. There is no need for the goddesses to pay so much attention. The fifth prince possessed an extraordinary temper, but his voice sounded gentle and polite like a spring breeze. "Your Royal Highness, please go to the Divine Palace to rest," said the goddess in the lead. The fifth prince nodded slightly, and then followed the goddess to the Divine Palace on the Enchanted Island. He looked around at his surroundings. This place was indeed a spiritual treasure for cultivation. Shortly after the fifth prince entered Yaotai Divine Palace, it caused quite a wave of excitement on the islands. Those who had already arrived from principalities such as Jiutian Temple, Xianyuan Palace, Qin Palace, Tianji Pavilion, and Lihan Heaven had all heard the news. Many people tried to figure out where the fifth prince had settled so that they could visit him later. After all, he was the descendant of Emperor Xia. Respect must be paid. There was an enchanted island nestled near the Divine Palace where there were many beautiful pavilions and lofty structures. Between the pavilions, there were many lush and ancient trees. The scenery was incredibly ethereal. A group of people sat in a pavilion under a century-old tree, chatting casually. One of them had a head of white hair and a handsome visage. It was Yi Futian. He had been there for a while and had been welcomed to rest on this enchanted island. The Yaotai Divine Feast would be held the next day. On the way over, Yi Futian had heard many people mention that the reason for the Yao Tai divine feast was to select a path companion for Yao Shi, which made Yi Futian speechless. Although Yao Shi was a perfect woman, he had no fantasies about her and was unclear as to the reason why Yao Shi had deliberately invited him to come. The two hadn't had much contact at all. He could not believe that Yao Shi might have feelings for him. When one reached their age and spiritual state, it was not easy to foster romantic feelings like it was for young adolescents. As mentally stable as they were, it was not very easy for them to move their true emotions. Unless it was to choose the right person, rather than on emotional preferences. Then it was more likely. Qin Zhuang came over and said to Yi Futian, "The fifth prince of Emperor Xia's palace has arrived at the Yao Tai Divine Palace." Yi Futian heard Qin Zhuang's words with a touch of surprise. Although he knew that Emperor Xia had 5 sons besides Xia Qingyuan, he had never been in contact with them. After all, Emperor Xia's palace was immense and there had been no opportunity for their paths to cross. What puzzled him was, why had His Royal Highness come? Did he prefer Yao Shi's beauty? If it was simply a matter of appearances, Yao Shi was indeed one of the most beautiful women in Emperor Xia's realm. In the upper world, of all the women he had seen, only Queen Xiao could surpass Yao Shi. As for Xia Qingyuan, who he had never seen dressed as a woman, it was difficult for him to judge. "Let's go and pay him a visit," Yi Futian said as he stood up. Even though they'd had no interactions before, when they ended up in the same place, a visit was still expected. Qin Zhuang nodded. As the group got up and prepared to leave, a voice was heard, saying, "Master Yi." The speaker was a peerless beauty. Yao Shi was wearing a long dress today that enhanced her sexy figure to its fullest. Her face revealed a gentle yet charming smile. Master Ye's temperament seemed to have become even more delightful. "Since you entered the Saint Plain, you have become even more handsome and extraordinary." Yao Shi's voice was as gentle as the water, and he was moved by her every smile and sound. This was a woman who could satisfy anyone's fantasies without any faults. "The goddess flatters me," Yi Futian said. He saw that Yao Shi's temperament had also changed slightly. The feeling of being nearly immortal was even stronger, just like a figure in a painting. It made Yi Futian faintly feel that Yao Shi might be just inches away from the divine path. Was the Yao Tai divine feast being held because Yao Shi was about to enter the Saint Plain? "We haven't seen each other for some time. Master Yi seems to be estranged again." Yao Shi swept a playful side glance at Yi Futian, so charming in her every movement that it could make a man drunk with feelings. Futian smiled and shook his head. "Yao Shi, I heard that His Royal Highness is here, and we were just about to go and visit. Why don't we go together? His Royal Highness has other people to receive him. How come I have just arrived and Master Yi already can't wait to chase me away?" Yao Shi said, joking. Yi Futian still didn't know how to respond. "This is Yao Tai Divine Palace, how could I drive you away?" Yi Futian laughed and said, "I am afraid that I would be blown out of the Enchanted Islands. Who would dare to blast Master Yi out of the island? I would certainly not let them get away easily." Yao Shi smiled softly. "I heard Master Yi had not planned on coming, and that you finally acquiesced only after being informed that Yao Shi had insisted on your presence. I have just entered the realm of the divine path, and my realm is still unstable. Naturally, I needed to cultivate more." "I beg your pardon," Yi Futian responded. "The instability of the realm refers to the destruction of the saint?" Yao Shi went directly to the heart of the matter. "It was in the realm of the sage that you defeated Shao Xing of the Saint Plain, and Master Ye's cultivation was quite stable then. It is clear that you did not want to come. Pity, I had always hoped to see Master Yi again." Yi Futian smiled helplessly. "Yao Shi, you are going to make me run away with the way you talk." Casual chatting was impossible. Yao Shi laughed softly. She brushed the hair away from her forehead, appearing even more charming and enticing. She looked at Yi Futian and said, "Then I won't tease Master Yi. I'll just sit here and we can talk." "Of course." Yi Futian nodded. The black-winged condor sat watching next to them, his eyes wide. He looked at Yi Futian, then looked at Yao Shi. It was as if no one else was around. Yi Futian and Yao Shi were chatting on their enchanted island. Meanwhile, another island was also quite lively. Yi Futian and Yao Shi were chatting on their enchanted island. Meanwhile, another island was also quite lively. Naturally, it was the enchanted island where the fifth prince, Xia Luan, was located. By this time, a banquet was already set up for everyone to sit and chat to their heart's content. Well-known characters from all walks of life had come. Folks from Xianyuan Palace, Jiutian Temple, Tianji Pavilion, Qin Palace, Shura Palace, and many other geniuses and disciples from other places had all come to visit. No matter how outstanding one was, Emperor Xia's realm was ultimately ruled by Emperor Xia. All the top forces were under the jurisdiction of the emperor, so when the prince arrived, etiquette dictated that visits must be paid to show respect. In addition, as the host, Yaotai Divine Palace had also sent their person as a representative, a goddess known as Yunshang whose cultivation was of the Saint Plane. She was highly recognized in Yaotai Divine Palace. Although her beauty was no comparison to Yao Shi, she was quite stunning. However, the person that everyone wanted to see was Yao Shi. After all the rumors that came from Yaotai Divine Palace were about Yao Shi. I haven't come out for quite some time. Today, I got to meet a lot of influential characters from Emperor Xia's realm, which is a great blessing. Bottoms up. The fifth prince, Xia Luan, raised his glass with a smile. His gentle manner was greatly magnetic. Everyone raised a glass and drank up together. After putting down the glasses, someone laughed and said, "Most of the known characters in Emperor Xia's realm only have titles bestowed by others. It's just that your Royal Highness and the princess never come out to visit. Otherwise, there would be no place for the likes of us." This statement was rather self-deprecating, but no one really felt that it was inappropriate. After all, the status of the other was clear. This kind of humility could be regarded as acting out of politeness, not something to be taken too seriously. Not so. Xia Luan smiled and shook his head. Being the characters of renown in Emperor Xia's realm, you have reasons to be proud. Take the disciple of the sword master of Lihan, Wang Chuan, whose defeat led to his sainthood. How legendary! Or take Yi Futian for example, who defeated a saint as a sage. That was something I could never have done. Many of you have already stepped into the Saint Plane and have caused some sensations in our world. All your fame came from your talents and strength. It cannot be considered vanity. Wang Chuan didn't come this time, but I heard that Yi Futian has already arrived. I very much want to see this unparalleled figure. When is he coming over? A young man who exuded a coolness asked. This person sat not far from Xia Luan, his eyes narrow and long, giving him a feminine look. His body exuded a faint sharpness. This young man was the young master of Shura Palace, Chu Shi. Having said that, his attention turned toward Goddess Yunshang and he asked, "Goddess, why haven't we seen Yao Shi?" Goddess Yunshang smiled gently and responded calmly, "Sister Yao Shi had gone to visit Master Yi." They were previously acquainted, so when she heard that Master Yi had arrived, she went directly to visit. "We beg the forgiveness of your Royal Highness." Upon hearing Goddess Yunshang's reply, everyone revealed a strange look. Yao Shi had gone to visit Yi Futian. Rumors from the outside said that Yaotai Divine Feast was being held for matters related to a path companion for Yao Shi. What was the meaning of her visiting Yi Futian? Did it mean that Yao Shi's heart had already found the where place it belonged? Moreover, all the influential characters of Emperor Xia's realm had gathered here. As the reigning virgin of Yaotai Divine Palace, Yao Shi had gone to visit Yi Futian alone. Didn't this mean that she regarded Yi Futian above everyone else? What's more, today, in addition to those from Emperor Xia's realm, His Royal Highness was also present. Even if Yi Futian's talents were peerless, he was still a subject of the realm, after all. No matter how one looked at this, both Yao Shi or Yi Futian should be there right now. No matter. Xia Luan did not show any expression and appeared very casual as if he didn't care at all. He smiled and said, "Since Goddess Yao Shi and Yi Futian are old friends, it ought to be so. Yaotai Divine Palace is the host of Yaotai Divine Feast, I am but a guest. The goddess need not care so much about what I think. Gratitude to your Royal Highness for your understanding." Goddess Yun Shang nodded with a smile. The atmosphere at the banquet was joyful. Everyone was chatting casually, but they all had their own concerns inside their hearts. From time to time, Mo Wen of Tianji Pavilion looked at Xia Luan. His eyes betrayed nothing, but in his heart, he was trying to figure out Xia Luan's reason for coming to Yaotai Divine Palace. He knew a lot more than ordinary people. Others only knew that there was a competition for the title of the first beauty of Emperor Xia's realm going on between the Holy Mother of the West and Queen Xiao, but they did not know that there was more to the story. It was about Emperor Xia, the Holy Mother of the West, and Queen Xiao. After spending some time at Xia Luan's place, everyone slowly left, not waiting for Yi Futian and Yao Shi. However, since the fifth prince himself didn't seem to care, the others had nothing else to say. However, when they left the enchanted island where Xia Luan was staying, they heard faint sounds of ethereal and peaceful strings coming from afar. Because the sound of the music itself contained spiritual power, its ability to penetrate was great and could carry the tune further, causing many to stop and listen. This music is quiet and beautiful. It fits perfectly with the atmosphere of the Yaotai Divine Palace and leads people into its artistic conception. Who is playing it? Someone asked Goddess Yun Shang. Yao Shi is the reigning virgin of Yaotai Divine Palace. She is proficient in many abilities, an expert in musical instruments, as well as dance and singing, Goddess Yun Shang responded. Judging from the sound of the music, it's coming from the island where Master Yi is staying. Sister Shi Yao is probably discussing the art of music with Master Yi. Yi Futian's talent for playing the guqing was well known. When old Master Xiao was celebrating his birthday, Yi Futian had swept away the cultivators from Lihan Heaven with a single performance. So it was quite reasonable for the two to discuss music when Yao Shi went to visit. However, this situation was causing some discomfort for many people. They were all guests but were being treated differently. It should be obvious that many who'd arrived there today had certain thoughts about Yao Shi. Among the women of that generation in Emperor Xia's realm, Xia Qingyuan was out of the question. Yao Shi was considered a very outstanding woman besides Xia Qingyuan, and it was rumored that Yaotai Divine Palace possessed a double cultivation method for couples and would not pose any limit on them. If this was really the case, then there were no other concerns. Perhaps it would even be a lovely story for posterity. But nothing had even begun, and yet it seemed that they were already behind. Chu Shi's brow raised slightly. He had courted Yao Shi before, but Yao Shi had never really been close to him, let alone playing instruments with him. No matter how one looked at it, this behavior was slightly dubious. Chu Shi stepped forward and landed on a raft on the lake in front of the islands. Many enchanted islands in Yaotai Divine Palace were connected by the numerous lakes. The raft moved forward quickly and sped toward the direction of the music, as fast as an arrow shot off from a bow. When they saw this, many people expressed an intrigued look. Then many figures stepped forward, landed on rafts, and moved forward across the lake. The waves of the lake flowed in the direction of the music. Many small rafts were now moving in that direction as well. On one of the rafts, a handsome young man clad in white clothes sat cross-legged. A guqin had appeared in front of him. He played. The music of the guqin was ethereal and in harmony with the atmosphere. It actually echoed the music from another island. The musical achievements of these musicians were obvious. The two played across a great space, yet they seemed to play as an ensemble, creating a beautiful harmony. Befitting of the name of Master of 100 Flowers, someone said, praising the man who played the guqin. He was the peerless man who had been raised by many goddesses in the 100 Flowers Valley of the Western region. He was called the Master of 100 Flowers. He was handsome and elegant, with great talents to boot. It was said that endless young women adored him in the 100 Flowers Valley, but he had never touched any of them. It was said that among many thousands of flowers, the leaves are never left behind. The lakes between the islands were clear and seemingly endless. Occasionally, flowers fell and floated upon the lake, adding to the landscape there. The leaf-shaped rafts were still floating, but Chushi's raft had stopped outside an enchanted island. He stood quietly on the raft, looking at the island. The sound of the guqin was coming from there. On the enchanted island, someone looked over there and saw Chushi's stick-straight body. He was standing there quietly like a statue. His loitering here, was it to provoke the resident of this island? On the enchanted island, Futian listened to the music quietly. There was a beautiful woman playing in front of him, and it was definitely a beautiful picture. He was a bit surprised that Shi could have such accomplishments in music. In many ways, compared to that proud little princess, Shi was even more full of womanly charm. At this time, Qin Zhuang walked over. Futian waved his hand at him, sensing the situation outside. Shi had released a faint breath which indicated provocation, ever so slightly. What was more, with the music coming from the Master of 100 Flowers, it was impossible for him not to know. At the Yaotai Divine Feast at the Yaotai Divine Palace, there were some who wanted something, and there were some who wanted nothing. Those who wanted something would naturally hold a grudge, but he wanted nothing, so nothing really mattered. Shi had attracted a lot of hostility. After a while, the music finally stopped. Shi smiled softly and asked, "How about that, Master Yi?" "It was perfect," Futian praised. Shi smiled and said, "Shi will be proud for a long time with such praise from Master Yi." "I think the goddess had other ulterior motives." Futian smiled and shook his head. Shi understood what Futian was referring to and gave him a charming look. "Since this is the case, Shi will not disturb Master any longer tonight." As she said this, she moved lightly in her steps. With a quick flicker, as if dancing, she quickly disappeared. After Shi left, the music from outside stopped. Chushi's lonely raft drifted past, moving along through the water, and soon disappeared. After they had left, someone else came to the island, asking to be seen. It was someone sent by the 5th Prince, Xia Luan. "Greetings to Saint Yi," the messenger said as he bowed. "Does His Royal Highness have anything to command?" Futian asked. His Royal Highness had planned to come in person, but did not want to disturb Saint Ye's musing, so he asked me to send a message instead. His Royal Highness was too polite. "I should be the one who visits him," Futian said. "If His Royal Highness has any words for me, please let me know." "His Royal Highness wishes that Saint Yi would not touch Goddess Shi," said the messenger. The day of Yaotai Divine Feast had finally arrived. Yaotai Enchanted Island was bustling with festivities. The day of Yaotai Divine Feast had finally arrived. Yaotai Enchanted Island was bustling with festivities. The top principalities had all arrived at the Enchanted Islands in advance. They were all traveling by boat to the largest enchanted island. Their destination was the king of all the islands, the home of Yaotai Divine Palace. On the immense lake, thousands of boats traveled together. The sunlight shone down and the waves sparkled, creating an extremely lovely landscape. On the boats, many of the well-known figures from Emperor Xia's realm observed the lone figure who was sailing ahead of them. Many discussions centered around this individual. "That's His Royal Highness the 5th Prince." Someone pointed to the figure in question. Xia Luan stood with his hands folded behind his back as the boat moved downstream. All around him, the passengers of the other small boats bowed and acknowledged him as they passed him, much like the stars surrounding the moon. Many people were wondering whether the 5th Prince, Xia Luan, had come here for Goddess Shi. If so, who could possibly compete with him for her hand? However, some news had come out of Yaotai Divine Palace yesterday. After many of the top figures in Emperor Xia's realm had arrived, Goddess Shi had gone to visit Futian alone. She had not paid a visit to the fifth prince. Many people couldn't help but be impressed. Yi Futian, who had come from the lower world in recent years, had truly captured the imagination of his generation. Before him, all the proud sons of Emperor Xia's realm battled to be at the top. All of them were brilliant in their own right and power. However, his appearance had overwhelmed all the others. With him around, no one else mattered very much. Now, was it possible that he could take away attention from the prince? Many people turned and looked for Yi Futian. Even those who had never met him were inquiring after him. After a while, the boat passengers' eyes locked onto a figure in the distance. The man had just taken a boat from an enchanted island. He was clad in clothing white as snow and stood casually, looking extremely handsome and attractive. His visage was perfection in itself, one in a million. What was even rarer about him was the transcendent temperament of his person. It still made others notice him immediately. As the small boat moved forward, his entire person seemed to integrate into the scenery, as if he had always been part of it. "That's Yi Futian," someone remarked. As other boats started to cross, one after another, the passerby looked in Yi Futian's direction. Everyone was at least a little curious about this world-famous figure whose reputation resounded through Emperor Xia's realm. Even the cultivators in the Saint Plain were no exception in their curiosity. Although the cultivation between sages and saints was only one step away, the distance between them was as far as heaven from earth. The fact that Yi Futian had been able to defeat saints as a sage was lore for the ages. It was a pity that Xiao Sheng, the genius figure from Xiao clan, had ended up as no more than a footnote in this legacy. Undoubtedly, Yi Futian sensed the attention of the people. The boat continued moving downstream. His eyes focused on the Yao Tai enchanted island in front. It was indeed a fairyland, beautiful beyond description. Looking forward, one could see the stairs next to the lakeshore that lead up to the magnificent connected palaces. Further ahead lay the cultivation temple of Yao Tai Divine Palace. Each island was occupied by a palace. A boat rushed past Yi Futian at an incredibly fast speed, causing ripples to spread across the calm lake. Yi Futian looked around and saw a lone boat overtaking his in an instant. Standing upon it was a figure clad in all black, showing a hint of coldness in his expression. Yi Futian had encountered this figure yesterday. It was the young master of Shura Palace, Chu Shi. Chu Shi continued forward as if he was not aware of Yi Futian's presence. Once he had passed Yi Futian, he went straight toward Yao Tai Enchanted Island. This scene had indeed attracted the attention of many. Yesterday, Chu Shi had hovered outside the enchanted island where Yi Futian stayed. Everyone knew it. There seemed to be some invisible contention between the two. After all, it was no secret that Chu Shi had once courted Yao Shi. Yi Futian did not look at Chu Shi either. Instead, he directed his attention at the boat passing him. The boat seemed to slow down intentionally as if to wait for him. When Yi Futian's small boat caught up to it, the person on the other boat turned around to face him. He nodded with a smile, his appearance very diplomatic. Yi Futian brought his hands forward and bowed slightly in greeting. Yi Futian greets His Royal Highness. The man he addressed was the fifth prince, Xia Luan. Yesterday, Xia Luan had sent a message to the island where Yi Futian stayed, the meaning of which still eluded Yi Futian. Given Xia Luan's status, if he had thoughts about keeping Yao Shi for himself, he need not resort to such a method. Directly competing with Yi Futian would only make himself appear classless. So, what exactly was Xia Luan's intention? For the time being, he was still puzzled. Although he knew that Emperor Xia had 5 sons, he did not understand the 5th prince. Xia Luan was the first prince he had met. Xia Luan smiled winsomely at Yi Futian and said, "Brother Yi, I'm afraid my sister won't like this trip you are taking." Everyone around who heard Xia Luan's words looked surprised. What did that even imply? Was the little princess truly interested in Yi Futian? If this was the case, Yi Futian already possessed an unparalleled talent. Coupled with this layer of relationship, it would be enough for him to summon all the forces within Emperor Xia's realm. No wonder he dared to challenge the Shao clan head-on. Perhaps Queen Shao simply could not deny her baby girl. Even so, this guy had still come to attend the Yao Tai Divine Feast, which was kind of a shameless act. Although Yao Shi was perfect, if a choice had to be made between her and Xia Qingyuan, most people would choose the crowning jewel of Emperor Xia's possession. After all, she was widely known as the future Ren Huang. Xia Qingyuan herself was truly beautiful, the daughter of the first beauty in Emperor Xia's realm. How could her beauty be questioned? Yao Shi had more womanly charm, but wouldn't a proud and untouchable noblewoman like the little princess be a more fulfilling conquest? And even though such an expectation was a long shot, just imagine what would it be like if the little princess dressed in women's clothing of her own volition one day. Moreover, the people also noticed that the fifth prince, Xia Luan, had addressed Yi Futian as Brother Yi, which paid Yi Futian more than enough respect. After all, Yi Futian's title, for now, was nothing more than the princess's bodyguard. Of course, no one was stupid enough to still consider Yi Futian only as that. Would a bodyguard be able to force Shao Xing to his death? When Yi Futian heard Xia Luan's words, he also revealed a look of surprise. As a prince, Xia Luan's words were a little too casual and carried a sense of ridicule. Still, it was surprisingly pleasing to the ears, as if the prince could get close to you in an instant. Surely His Royal Highness is joking. How could my attendance of Yao Tai Divine Feast be a source of unhappiness to the princess? Isn't your Royal Highness here also? Yi Futian responded. Xia Luan was the older brother of Xia Qingyuan, and he could joke with Yi Futian, but Yi Futian had to pay careful attention to the consequences. Xia Luan smiled at Yi Futian with a profound smile. He continued, "It seems that there is someone even Qingyuan can't control." Yi Futian couldn't figure out a way to respond. Xia Luan's speech seemed to be a bit too casual. If only Xia Qingyuan knew, what would she think? The two men sailed side by side in their boats. Surprisingly, there was no sense of competition between them. Yi Futian would not take the initiative to compete with the prince. Xia Luan did not seem to want that either. It was the young master Chu Shi of Shura Palace who seemed to harbor that intention. However, in the eyes of everyone else, no matter how exceptionally talented the young master of Shura Palace was, if he faced such genius as Yi Futian, he would probably be crushed. If Yi Futian wanted to fight, except for His Royal Highness, no one would stand a chance against him. After all, everyone had witnessed Yao Shi's behavior yesterday. The boats docked at the shore. The passengers alighted one after another and walked up the steps to the Yao Tai Divine Palace. Both sides of steps leading to the Yao Tai Divine Palace were lined with goddesses clad in pure white. They looked as if they had emerged out of the ether. The place appeared to be a true paradise. Yi Futian had also stepped onto the road. As he moved forward with everyone else, he sometimes felt a look or two being cast his way. On this trip so far, Xia Luan, the fifth prince, and Yi Futian had attracted the most attention. The mighty group continued moving forward. All those who had qualified to be here were extremely outstanding figures. The Yao Tai Divine Palace had a platform set for a huge banquet. After the arrival of all the attendees, goddesses led everyone to their seats. Many found out that the seating arrangement had not been made at random, but had been done in a very deliberate manner. The most outstanding figures had been seated at the front. Yi Futian was naturally seated at the forefront of the Yao Tai Divine Feast. There was no one on the platform yet. The top figures of the older generation had not come to the Yao Tai Divine Feast this time. In fact, they hadn't been invited, which sent a clear message that the feast had nothing to do with them. Fine wines and delicacies were being offered up. The attendees chatted easily amongst themselves. But the important figures like the Holy Mother of the West and Yao Shi were no-shows so far, so the rest waited quietly. I had heard that Palace Lord Yi entered the divine path. Now that we met again, I salute Palace Lord Yi. Gu Mu of Jiutian Temple faced Yi Futian, toasting him. Beside him were several extraordinary persons who were all children of the master of Jiutian Temple. They, too, raised their glasses to Yi Futian to pay their respects. Thank you very much. Yi Futian raised his glass in return. Once upon a time, Gumu had accompanied Pei Qianying to Jiutian Temple. However, that little grudge no longer mattered to Yi Futian, who was now a saint. Unfortunately, there is no saint ranking in the Jiutian Temple. Otherwise, there would be a place for Palace Lord Yi. Mo Wen from Tianji Pavilion also laughed and raised a glass to Yi Futian. I also salute Palace Lord Yi, who is now Saint Yi. Yi Futian took another drink and asked, I heard that there was nothing that Tianji Pavilion doesn't know, so do you know who poisoned Xiao Sheng? Surely Saint Yi jokes. Omniscience is dependent on the who and the what, so only God could be truly omnipotent. If Tianji Pavilion knew something that even the little princess could not detect, we would report personally to Emperor Xia's palace, Mo Wen said with a smile. Indeed, Tianji Pavilion did not know, but through certain clues, some conclusions could be drawn. Even if they knew, they would dare not speak of it. The things that had already been entangled with that palace were not things they were able to participate in. No matter how well the Tianji Pavilion collected its information, it must respect the ultimate authority. All drank and chatted to their heart's content at the Yaotai Divine Feast. All drank and chatted to their heart's content at the Yaotai Divine Feast. A group of goddesses appeared when the banquet was in full swing, dazzling everyone in attendance. 7 figures appeared at Yaotai at the forefront. Every one of them was unique and stunning. The 7 goddesses of Yaotai. All who were present looked at the 7 of them and mumbled excitedly. The 7 goddesses of Yaotai were of extreme renown in Emperor Xia's realm. All previous 7 goddesses of Yaotai had been candidates for the position of Virgin of Yaotai. As such, be it in talent or appearance, all of them were extremely exceptional. 5 of these goddesses were saints. One of them had reached the stage of saint of true self. All 7 of the goddesses sat on the ground in a line. Their dresses draped over the floor, making the scene look like a painting. What are they doing here? Many looked puzzled. At that moment, several others emerged on the stage. The one in the middle was dressed in a phoenix tail-styled, floor-length dress. It looked as if fire danced on the ground around her. That figure wore a phoenix coronet and robes of ranks, looking elegant and stunning. The dazzling phoenix tail-styled dress was tailored to her shape, making her look perfect. She walked to the center of the stage and scanned the crowd. Her smile was enough to mesmerize all who gazed upon it. Everyone present was enamored by her beauty. Yi Futian stood and looked at the goddess as everyone else did. He was rather surprised to find Yao Shi capable of handling such elegant beauty. That figure was none other than Yao Shi, the Virgin of Yaotai. At that moment, she had lost all the charm and gentleness of a lady that she had shown him before. Regal elegance emanated from her like she was a queen looking down onto her subjects. She was someone that no one would dare to defile. At that moment, Yi Futian was unable to help but recall Queen Xiao and Xia Qingyuan. Such a bearing should have been something only they were capable of emanating. However, it was obvious that Yao Shi was capable of handling such looks all the same. The aura that emanated from her seemed to be natural as well. Yi Futian was not the only one who had never seen her like this, as not many had come to know Yao Shi of being capable of looking like this. Many were stunned by Yao Shi's beauty, which was different from how she was usually seen, making the impact very powerful. Chu Shi, the young palace lord of the Azura Palace, looked forward with dazed eyes. As a saint, there was little doubt about how firm his state of mind was, yet he was nonetheless momentarily dazed. He had always known that there was another side to Yao Shi's beauty, one that no one knew about. Her so-called gentleness was but a facade shown to the world. He had pursued Yao Shi many years ago, yet he had never been able to truly get close to her. He was able to feel an apparent distance from her, as well as the pride that belied those gentle, amicable looks of hers. Was this the real her? Chu Shi regained his composure and a bright smile was seen in his deep eyes, suggesting that he had become even more enamored by Yao Shi's beauty. Only one such woman would have deserved his attention and his desire. He was capable of understanding her. Yao Shi's dress sprawled on the ground as she sat at the stage. Two goddesses of saint level stood by her side. That scene enabled more to understand Yao Shi's status in the Yaotai Divine Palace. Despite being the virgin of the Yaotai Divine Palace, her training was lacking and she was still one step away from achieving sainthood. Despite her status as the virgin, she should not have been able to behave and be treated this way in front of her St. Plain seniors. However, at that moment, everything looked so natural that it seemed that she had been deserving of such a position all along. That seemed to mean that Virgin Yao Shi had been designated as the successor to the position of Palace Lord of Yaotai Divine Palace, and that decision was not one that would be changed. In the absence of the Holy Mother of the West, she was the queen of the Yaotai Divine Palace. Yi Futian felt somewhat rattled inside. The scene had proved to be rather shocking to him as well. Yao Shi had only visited the island for the first time the day before. She had been a quiet and modest maiden, looking gentle and beautiful as she'd lovingly played the guqin. Yet, at this moment, she was extraordinarily stunning and looked like a queen. The greater the contrast, the great the impact. Furthermore, Yao Shi never showed such a side to him when she was around him. He never knew that her status was this high. That position on the stage should have belonged to the master of Yaotai Divine Palace, the seat of the Holy Mother of the West. On that day, it was Yao Shi who sat there, as the Holy Mother of the West was absent. That meant that Yao Shi was able to speak on behalf of the Holy Mother of the West right there and then, in Yaotai Divine Palace. I, Yao Shi, was the one who invited all of you to the Yaotai Divine Feast. It is my honor to see you all here at Yaotai Divine Palace, Yao Shi said, smiling as she addressed her audience. It was only then that the crowd understood that the feast they were at had not been thrown by the Holy Mother of the West. It was thrown by Yao Shi. As had been speculated by the crowd, Yao Shi was indeed capable of speaking on behalf of the Holy Mother of the West. She was even able to throw the Yaotai Divine Feast on her own. With that said, there was little surprise as to why the Holy Mother of the West had not shown up. What is the purpose of holding the Yaotai Divine Feast, if I may ask, goddess? Mo1 of Tianji Pavilion asked. There were rumors throughout Emperor Xia's realm that the Yaotai Divine Feast was meant for selecting a path companion for Yao Shi. With her taking charge of the event personally, many were wondering if she was there to choose her future husband. Many turned to look at Yao Shi with great interest after hearing Mo1's question. They were rather moved to see Yao Shi as she was at the moment. Anyone who was able to conquer her would probably conquer the Yaotai Divine Palace. The Virgin of Yaotai Divine Palace seemed destined to become the future Palace Lord. I'd like you all to hear a song, Yao Shi said. Many looked puzzled at that. A song? What is Yao Shi getting at with this? The Yaotai Divine Feast was a grand event held in the Yaotai Divine Palace. It looked rather random and haughty for her to be the one inviting the geniuses from all over Emperor Xia's realm. What would that song be? Chu Shi asked. What kind of song would it have been worth Yao Shi throwing the Yaotai Divine Feast? It is a song that my teacher acquired years ago. It has rarely been heard in Emperor Xia's realm, and I can assure you that it will not disappoint, Yao Shi replied with a smile, piquing the interest of many. Judging from Yao Shi's tone, the song seemed to be an extraordinary one. Furthermore, Yao Shi claimed that it was a song that had never been heard in Emperor Xia's realm. That meant that only a select few had heard the song before. Since you put it that way, Goddess Yao Shi, I'm really interested, the Master of the 100 Flowers smiled and said. He was exceptionally handsome. A dandy whose smile could mesmerize many. However, the song will be rather overbearing. Please enjoy the feast without worries and the song shall be played later. I'm afraid that it would be a waste inviting you all here otherwise, as it might rob you of your enjoyment of the feast, Yao Shi continued. What she said piqued the curiosity of the crowd even more. The song is an overbearing one. Was she implying that there were some among us them would be unable to withstand the power of that song? The crowd was filled with exceptional people from all over Emperor Xia's realm. There were even many on the Saint Plain present. All of them were curious as to how powerful that song might be. "Don't keep us hanging, Goddess Yao Shi. Please, play," someone in the crowd said. None of them were there at the Yao Tai Divine Palace just to have a feast. Maybe the song was a test from Yao Shi. "That's right. Please, just play, Goddess," someone smiled and said. Xia Luan sat quietly as he looked at Yao Shi. Despite being the prince of Emperor Xia's realm, he had not been received and honored much by being there on that day. Although a goddess had been sent to receive him the day before, Yao Shi had never bothered to greet him. At that moment, his status meant that the Yao Tai Divine Palace should have invited him to a special seat just for him, yet that had not happened either. However, he found none of that to be surprising, taking it all in a stride. After all, he was not there to be served by the Yao Tai Divine Palace. Yao Shi heard the cheers of the crowd and smiled, saying, "If that would be the case, then shall I begin?" "Please, Goddess." Everyone nodded. Yao Shi waved and gyukins manifested in front of the 7 goddesses who sat before her. All 7 goddesses were getting ready to play at the same time. "Let's begin," Yao Shi said. Notes were played as soon as she gave the order. The one in the middle of the 7 plucked the strings and all the others continued to play. The music danced and seeped into the ears of the audience. The spiritual power of many tingled as well. The tune was soft and comforting, making it a pleasure to hear. It was as if one was being steeped in an extremely beautiful painting. One was sitting alone somewhere outside of the bustling world. There were flowing waters and a bridge, as well as beauties playing music all around. It was all leisurely and immersive, making those within earshot feel as if they were about to doze off. Yi Futian found himself inside one such beautiful painting. He leaned on a pavilion and there were mountains and rivers around him, making him feel invigorated. Jieyu's figure appeared right before him. Her smile made his soul shudder. That image was just too beautiful, making the ones experiencing it want to stay within it forever. An illusion. A thought crossed Yi Futian's mind. He was naturally capable of keeping his senses. The song was able to bring the listeners into an elusive realm, and they were entering the realm willingly. It was as if the song was a dream tailored to the listener, affecting the emotions of those within earshot. Furthermore, the elusive realm that everyone was in differed from one another, as said realms were created based on their thoughts. The notes continued to dance and immerse into the spiritual will of the listeners, seeping in without notice and affecting the emotions of the audience. Urges welled within some people before they knew it. It was the same with Yi Futian as well, and he frowned upon realizing it. It was desire. The song was bringing up the desires of its listeners. His will began to resist, but the sound of the song became increasingly rushed. Every note seemed able to keep the listeners' desires burning. The eyes of many changed. At that moment, a group of goddesses came down before everyone. Every single goddess was dressed in an extremely sexy manner and they danced. Their alluring movements and enticing eyes caused many to want to surrender to their urges completely, getting themselves completely immersed in the illusions. The tune continued to seep into Yi Futian's mind. He too saw the bodies of those extremely sexy ladies and it seemed as if he saw Jieyu walking up to him, smiling. He seemed to see Xia Qingyuan dressed in women's clothing as well and looking stunning in it. He also saw a very sexy and alluring Yao Shi closing in on him. There was even the elegant figure of the glass saint, the one who was known to be the #1 beauty in the eastern state, within the picture. She looked incredibly stunning. It was as if they would have thrown themselves into his arms, so long as he was willing, and continued to be steeped in the beautiful picture. His spiritual will seemed to be about to give up resisting. His blood began to boil. The tune was still playing and every note seemed to be out to crush his resisting will, urging him to let himself loose. A terrifying song indeed. A thought crossed Yi Futian's mind. Xia Luan, who was at Yi Futian's side, was struggling as well. He was wondering if the song was the Heavenly Demon's Song of the 6 Desires. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.